Before we begin, listener, remember to gently tap like and subscribe so you won't miss the next story. Tonight, I'll take you through the quiet halls where the walls still breathe, where every sound means something, even when no one's there to make it. 5 stories, each one a whisper left behind by those who never truly left. So, turn down the lights, lie still, and listen carefully, because some sounds don't stop when you wake up. Story 1. The Knocking Beneath the Chapel. The chapel was never meant for sleep. Its stones sighed with every breath of the wind, and the candles, those frail, trembling sentinels, burned with a color too pale to be holy. Father Rowan often said that silence was the proof of faith. Yet on that night, silence failed us. I was polishing the altar when I heard it. 3 knocks. Slow, measured, deliberate, they rose from beneath the flagstones, as though someone or something was asking to be let in. The sound did not echo. It pulsed, steady as a heartbeat, and I swear I felt it under my soles. Father Rowan didn't look up from his prayer book. He merely whispered, "It's awake again. Don't answer. I am so busy work." But the knocking continued, patient as rain, almost polite. And in that stillness, I realized it wasn't coming from far below. It was closer. It was moving beneath where I stood, following me as I stepped aside. When the last candle flickered out, the sound stopped. And yet, inside the darkness, I could still hear it 3 knocks, softly repeating from somewhere deep inside my chest. I did not sleep that night. The chapel had no warmth, no scent of devotion, only the stale perfume of wax and stone. I sat beside the altar until dawn, waiting for Father Rowan to speak of the sound we both heard. But when he finally looked at me, his eyes carried the same calm cruelty I had seen in dying men who'd accepted their fate. "You'll grow used to it, Thomas," he said. "Every chapel has a heartbeat. Ours is simply louder. One is that addiction." I wanted to believe him. Truly, I did. Yet that day, while sweeping the nave, I noticed something wrong with the air. Each time my broom brushed the flagstones, a faint hum followed, like the echo of breath drawn through hollow wood. When I stopped, it stopped. When I resumed, it returned, aligning itself to my movement, as though the floor were breathing with me. I knelt, pressing my ear against the stone. Hold, still, but beneath it, a faint rhythm, steady and human. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. It reminded me of a code, a signal, perhaps even prayer. At dusk, Father Rowan began preparing for Mass. He asked me to fetch the small silver bell from the sacristy. I obeyed. Yet when I returned, the sound of the bell was already there, ringing softly from beneath the floor, out of time with his hands. He froze, mid-chant. The bell slipped from his grasp, rolling toward the chancel step. It stopped exactly where I had heard the knocks the night before. The priest crossed himself slowly. "It's restless again," he murmured. "It hears us when we speak." As thing. I wanted to laugh, to deny it. But then the candlelight rippled across the walls, shadows bending in the shape of unseen footsteps. Something walked beneath the chapel that night, not with haste, not in rage, but with dreadful patience. Later, in my small chamber, I could still hear the faint drumming through the floorboards, syncing with my pulse. The wind outside had died completely, and for the first time in my life, I longed for the noise of the living world, a cartwheel, a barking dog, anything, to drown that rhythm. Instead, there was only the dark and a voice within me whispering the thought I dared not name. What if the knocking isn't trying to get out? What if it's calling me to come down? By the third night, the chapel no longer waited for darkness to come. It breathed on its own. Every wall, every pew, every hollow in the stone seemed to carry a pulse, slow at first. Like the stretch of lungs before a sigh, the air thickened with something unseen, as if the whole place was listening. Father Rowan forbade me to speak of it. "It's only the foundation settling," he said, though his hands trembled when he lit the incense. "Don't encourage it by naming it aloud." Number 3. But it wasn't the stones. I could feel that much. The knocks had multiplied no longer 3, but 6, then 9, forming patterns, phrases, almost a rhythm. I found myself counting them under my breath, unable to stop. Each morning, the sound began beneath the chapel floor. By evening, it was inside the walls. One afternoon, I ventured to the crypt despite his warning. The air down there felt heavier, thick as syrup, and the torches burned low, even though no draft stirred. I traced the sound to a sealed hatch, carved with the sigil of St. Oswin, 2 keys crossed over a circle of nails. The metal was cold, but the wood beneath it pulsed faintly beneath my fingers, alive and steady as a heartbeat. Something thumped once hard enough to make dust fall from the ceiling. Then again, and then a whisper. "Thomas, Way." It was my name, clear as breath on the ear, but far too close, as if someone had spoken it from inside the door. I stumbled back, nearly dropping my lantern. The flame quivered but didn't go out. It was Father Rowan's voice that broke the silence behind me. "You heard it, didn't you? And he stood at the stairwell, his face shadowed. "You must never answer. It will learn your rhythm if you do. Once it knows your rhythm, it will find you. Train." That night, I tried to pray, but each word I uttered came back, distorted, repeated softly in the same cadence as the knocks. I covered my ears, yet the sound grew sharper, more deliberate. I could feel it through the mattress, crawling into my bones. I rose and fled the chamber, only to realize the sound was now above me. The roof timbers creaked in time with it. The bell at the altar rattled on its own. For the first time, the chapel answered itself. A knock below, an echo above, a call and a response. I found Father Rowan kneeling before the altar, sweat glistening on his temples. He was humming a low hymn, a melody so old it barely had form. I joined him without question, my voice trembling. The knocks faltered, slowed, then fell silent. He looked at me with hollow gratitude. "It listens to the living," he said softly, "but it only obeys the dead when they died." Hours passed. I thought it was over. But as dawn seeped through the stained glass, a faint tapping began again, so soft it could have been imagined. This time, it came not from the floor, nor the walls, but from inside the old confessional. I approached it with dread tightening in my throat. The curtain swayed gently, though the air was still. I leaned closer, close enough to smell incense and dust, and heard a voice whisper from within. "You prayed with him, Thomas. Now pray for me. And friend Iser." I froze, my breath shallow. The voice was not Rowan's. It was my own. Father Rowan's hands shook as he handed me the key. It was long, iron, and blackened by age, carved with small notches that looked almost like teeth. "You'll hear it again before dawn," he said, not meeting my eyes. When you do, go below and open the hatch. Do not speak. Do not pray. Just listen. Weigh. I didn't understand why he trusted me with such a task, but the look in his face, something between faith and fear, made refusal impossible. The chapel slept beneath a full moon. Shadows stretched long, and the air inside trembled faintly, like breath caught between ribs. The knocks began shortly after midnight. 3 soft raps, deliberate, as though the thing beneath knew its cue. I took a lantern and descended into the crypt. The air grew colder with each step. Stone walls glistened with moisture. The smell of iron and candle soot clung to everything. I could hear Father Rowan's faint chanting upstairs, each Latin phrase echoing down the stairwell. But beneath it all, the knocking waited. Steady, patient. When I reached the sealed hatch, the key pulsed in my palm, not with heat, but a strange vibration, like it was humming along with the sound below. The sigil of St. Oswin was half eaten by time. Only the circle of nails remained clear, almost fresh. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 knocks again. I knelt. My fingers trembled as I fitted the key into the lock. The metal resisted at first, then yielded with a sigh. As the seal broke, the knocking stopped. Completely. For a moment, there was only silence, the kind of silence that doesn't rest, but listens. Then came a new sound. Breathing. It was slow, labored, human. And it was right below me. I leaned forward, lantern trembling, and called out before I could stop myself. "Who's there?" 2. The reply was immediate, a whisper so faint I almost mistook it for my own thought. "You are." And for wheat. My breath caught. I stumbled backward, but my heel struck the lantern, and it fell, its flame flickering out. The darkness that followed wasn't ordinary. It moved. From beneath the hatch came the groan of wood under strain, then a sound like nails dragging over stone slow. Careful, deliberate. I could feel the vibration under my knees. I called for Father Rowan, but no voice came. Only the reply, 3 sharp knocks, directly under my hands now. The lid began to rise, just a fraction, just enough for air to slip through. The scent that followed was ancient, a mix of salt, ash, and something sweetly rotten. In the faint light of the moon that reached the stairwell, I saw it, a pale hand pressing against the underside of the hatch, skin stretched tight over bone. I slammed it shut instinctively. The wood hit the stone with a heavy thud. The hand did not retreat. It stayed there, motionless, as though waiting. Then, very slowly, it began to knock, not with its knuckles this time, with its nails. Tick, tick, tick. The sound filled the crypt, wormed its way into my skull until I felt it inside my teeth. My body wanted to run, but my legs refused to move. The hand slid away, disappearing into the gap below. Silence again. I thought it was over. When I finally turned to leave, I heard Father Rowan's voice behind me. "You opened it, didn't you?" But I turned, but it wasn't him. He stood at the top of the stairs, his eyes wide with terror, staring past me into the dark. "Thomas," he whispered, "step away from it. Sari." The knocking started again, this time faster, heavier, like fists pounding from below. The ground beneath me buckled, dust falling like snow. And beneath the rising thunder of knocks, a voice breathless, hoarse, but unmistakably mine, whispered from beneath the hatch. Don't let him close it, but is no too fried. Dawn arrived gray and hollow. The chapel felt lighter, as if some weight had finally been lifted from its walls. The knocks were gone. No pulse beneath the stones, no whisper beneath my breath. For the first time in weeks, the air stood still. Father Rowan sealed the hatch again, pressing a new wax sigil over the lock. His voice trembled as he recited the prayer of binding, syllables snapping like brittle twigs. When he was done, he slumped against the altar and exhaled. "It's over," he said. "It wanted you, Thomas, but you didn't answer." Well, I wanted to believe him. I truly did. That morning, we shared breakfast by the narrow window. The sun cut through the dust in pale shards, glinting on the chalice between us. He poured wine too much and spoke of returning to Newcastle, of reporting the incident to the bishop. For a brief hour, the chapel almost felt human again. But then I noticed something small, something wrong. The chalice trembled, just slightly, as if an invisible pulse shook the table. The wine inside rippled in perfect rhythm, 3 slow beats. Pause, 3 again. I froze, staring, my throat tightening. Father Rowan followed my gaze. His smile faded. "No," he whispered. "It can't be. Too heifer." He reached for the chalice, but the moment his fingers touched it, he winced and withdrew. Blood welled on his palm, a thin, straight line, as though the metal had bitten him. "It's still bound," he murmured, staring at the wax sigil. "It can't cross the seal, and for mind." Yet, as he spoke, I realized something dreadful. The sound wasn't coming from beneath anymore. It was inside the walls again, faint, echoing, like water trickling behind plaster. And then it moved. The sound slid along the wall, circling the chapel like something crawling in search of a way out. Knock, knock, knock. We both turned toward the confessional. The curtain swayed, though no wind moved. Father Rowan gripped his rosary until his knuckles whitened. "Stay here," he ordered. He approached the booth and pulled the curtain aside. Nothing, just a bench, dark wood, old incense. But then came another sound behind him, from the altar. The chalice toppled over on its own, spilling the red wine down the white cloth. The stain spread in the exact shape of a handprint. That night, Rowan barred every door. He forbade me to enter the chapel after sundown. Yet from my room above, I heard him pacing, muttering prayers too low for meaning. At some point, exhaustion dragged me into sleep. When I woke, it was to the sound of 3 knocks, soft, familiar, coming from the wall beside my bed. I whispered his name. No answer. The knocking grew louder, impatient now. I pressed my palm against the plaster and felt warmth, faint but living. Then, beneath my fingertips, a rhythm began steady, matching my heartbeat exactly. I stumbled into the corridor. The air smelled of smoke and iron. Downstairs, light bled from beneath the chapel door. Father Rowan stood before the altar, his arms outstretched, chanting. His eyes rolled white. Around him, the candles flared and guttered, their flames bending inward. "I sealed it," he cried, voice cracking. "I sealed it, Thomas. Team." But the sound came from behind me, now inside the walls. The beams, the ceiling, the chapel groaned, timbers flexing like ribs. And then, all at once, silence. The priest dropped to his knees, gasping. The candles steadied. The air cleared. "It's done," he whispered. "You see, it's gone. She has ready to raver." I wanted to believe him again. I almost did, until I noticed his chest rising and falling in odd intervals, not matching his breath. Each movement ended with a faint thump, like a heartbeat echoing from somewhere else. And when I reached out to steady him, he looked up at me with a calm, awful clarity and said, almost gently, "Thomas, I can hear it now. Wait." The moment Father Rowan said those words, I felt the air inside the chapel twist. Every candle flared white, stretching its flame toward him like hungry fingers. The light did not warm it, hissed, thin and alive. He clutched his chest, gasping, the sound inside him uneven and wet. With every heartbeat, something else seemed to answer from within, a second rhythm, deeper, older. "It's still here," he croaked. "Inside me." It found the open door. "Wait." I stepped forward, reaching for him, but he recoiled, as if my touch might break the fragile barrier between his skin and whatever throbbed beneath. The knocks began again. This time, not from below, nor the walls, but from inside him. 3 dull thuds against his ribs. A pause. 3 more. He fell to his knees, palms digging into the stone. "Seal it," he shouted, voice breaking, "before it learns to speak. That's spectity." I ran to the sacristy, fumbling through the drawers for anything holy wax, salt, oil. My hands shook so badly that the small vials rattled like bones. The air around me pulsed in rhythm with the knocking, growing louder, closer. From the nave came the sound of tearing cloth, followed by a low, guttural moan that no human throat could form. I rushed back and stopped dead. Father Rowan stood before the altar, his silhouette flickering in the failing candlelight. His eyes were dark, the pupils too wide, swallowing every glint of light. His lips moved, but not with prayer, with a sound that wasn't language, a sound that pulsed. The walls began to breathe. The floor swelled under my feet, soft as flesh. The wax sigil on the hatch cracked open, thin red light bleeding through the fracture like fire beneath ice. I shouted his name. He turned slowly, as though the movement wasn't his own. "Thomas." But the voice that answered wasn't his. It was deeper, metallic, reverberating like iron struck hollow. "You listened. Nextus." I stumbled backward, clutching the vial of oil. I could hear the chapel moving now, the pews shifting, the timbers creaking, all in time with that impossible heartbeat. I poured the oil in a circle around him, reciting every prayer I knew, though my voice shook and cracked. Rowan, or what wore his body, watched in silence, his chest rising unnaturally high, ribs straining as though something beneath them pressed to get out. When the circle was complete, I took the candle and hurled it into the oil. The flames leapt up in a perfect ring, swallowing the space between us. He screamed not in pain, but in rage. The knockings turned to pounding, shaking the stones so violently that dust fell like ash. You cannot silence what is heard. The thing inside him roared. You are the echo, with sound. For a heartbeat, I saw its true shape through the light, a shimmer, like heat bending the air. Not man, not beast, but a presence that made the world around it blur. I grabbed the fallen crucifix from the floor and pressed it to the crack in the hatch. The metal burned cold, the smell of iron and salt flooding the air. In the name of... I never finished. The voice within Rowan screamed again, and suddenly he lunged at me, slamming me against the altar. The sound of his ribs striking wood echoed like a drum. His hands closed around my throat. But then he stopped. His grip loosened. The eyes, black a moment ago, cleared for an instant. "Thomas," he whispered, "forgive me." Tented 4. Before I could answer, he seized my wrist and pressed the iron key into my palm. The same one that had opened the hatch. "Lock it," he gasped, "even if it means me. To wait." I hesitated, one terrible heartbeat of mercy, and in that moment, the thing inside him began to surface again, twisting his face into something unrecognizable. I slammed the hatch shut and turned the key. The noise that followed was not a scream. It was a collapse, the sound of everything being drawn inward, compressed into silence. The air vanished. The candles died all at once, leaving nothing but the hiss of cooling stone. When I dared open my eyes, Father Rowan was gone. The ring of ash remained, and at its center, the floor was cracked and blackened. Only the iron key lay on the stone, still warm. I stumbled up the stairs, half blind, half mad. Dawn had already crept through the chapel windows. The light seemed wrong, too thin, too pale, as if it had passed through something unclean. The world was quiet again, too quiet. Outside, the forest stood still. Not a bird, not a whisper of wind. But when I touched my chest, I felt it a faint rhythm beneath my ribs. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 again. It was weaker now, subdued, but alive. Like something breathing in its sleep, waiting for the next call. I left the chapel that morning. I didn't look back. Yet even now, when I close my eyes, I swear I can still feel the key pulsing in my pocket, and hear, very softly, from deep within me, knock, knock, knock. I left Northumberland before the second sunrise. The roads were empty, pale with frost, and every step I took felt as if the earth beneath still remembered the rhythm. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 again. By the time I reached the next village, I could no longer hear it aloud, only feel it. A faint tremor behind the ribs, a soft echo that wouldn't fade. I told myself it was guilt, or grief, or madness. But the truth was simpler. Something had followed me out of that chapel. At an inn near the coast, I rented a small room overlooking the cliffs. The waves crashed below, steady and cold, their rhythm almost comforting. I unpacked my things, meaning to burn the last trace of that cursed place. Yet the iron key was no longer in my coat. In its place, I found something else. A small glass jar, blackened with age, its lid sealed tight with red wax. I didn't remember taking it, didn't remember seeing it before. The glass was warm, and inside, something faintly moved. At first, I thought it was just the reflection of the sea, but when I leaned closer, the fogged surface cleared, and a shape pressed against the glass from within a pale fingertip, tapping once, twice, 3 times. Knock, knock, knock. My breath caught. I almost dropped it. Then, from inside the jar, a whisper hoarse and low. "Thomas, why did crashed?" The voice was familiar. It was Father Rowan's. And beneath it, barely audible, another voice whispered in perfect harmony. "You brought it with you, when he won of the chances." The jar pulsed in my hands. Outside, the sea grew silent. Even the wind forgot to move. And then, very softly, the knocking began again, not from the jar, not from the walls, but from inside my chest, answering it. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. That was the last entry I wrote in this journal. If someone finds it, don't open the jar. And if you hear knocking tonight, don't answer. Story 2. The Whispering Jar. For hours, I sat staring at the jar, half expecting my wife's voice to return. It didn't. Only the faint hum of the sea filled the silence, breaking now and then with the call of distant gulls. I almost convinced myself that what I'd heard had been a trick of the wind, or the restless echo of memory. But when night fell again, the sound returned softer this time, intimate, as though someone was whispering through the keyhole of the world. "Thomas, are you cold?" That. The voice was hers. Not a memory, not an imitation hers. The warmth in my chest turned to ice. She had died 3 winters ago, her lungs taken by fever before Christmas. I had prayed for her soul every night since, but never had I expected an answer. I went to the chest and lifted the cloth. The jar was glowing faintly, not with light, but with a shimmer like breath on glass. Tiny beads of condensation pulsed against the lid, keeping time with my heartbeat. "Where did you go?" she asked. I waited in the cold. Nothing still. Her words broke and trembled as if carried through water. I pressed my palm to the glass, foolishly hoping to feel her warmth through it. Instead, the surface stung like touching ice that burned. "Tell me where you are," I whispered. There was a pause, long and deliberate. Then, in a tone too gentle to be human, "I'm here. Thomas, you brought me. Where?" The candle flickered, and for a moment I thought I saw movement inside the faint outline of a face pressed against the inner wall of the glass. Not whole, not clear, but attempting to be. I staggered back, knocking the chair against the floor. The sound echoed once, then was answered by 3 soft knocks from inside the jar. Knock, knock, knock. The rhythm again, the same pattern that had followed me from the chapel. I knew then this wasn't her, not truly. Something was wearing her voice like a mask, learning the words that could unmake me. At dawn, I took the jar to the cliffs. The tide below was feral, hungry. I meant to throw it into the sea and be done with it. But just as I raised it, the whisper came again, desperate now, full of grief. "Please, don't leave me. It's so dark here. And Stace." And in that voice, for just an instant, she was my wife again. My hand faltered. The jar pulsed once, warm as living flesh. I lowered it slowly. I could not let go. I took the jar with me because I couldn't leave it behind. That's what I told myself. The truth is, I didn't choose to take it. It chose to follow. For days, it sat quietly on the wooden table of my rented room above the cliffs of Whitby. The sea's endless roar drowned my thoughts, but at night, when the tide fell and the world stilled, I would hear it again, that faint tapping from within the glass. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 again. I wrapped it in cloth, locked it inside a chest, buried it under books and prayers. But no matter how deep I hid it, the sound always found me soft, patient, rhythmic. Then, one night, as the candle burned low, I leaned close to listen. The glass was warm, trembling faintly, as though something inside was breathing. And then I heard it. Not a knock this time, a whisper. "Thomas, Wace." The voice was broken, fragile, and impossibly familiar. It was hers. My wife's voice. the one I had buried 3 winters ago. For 3 nights, the jar did not let me rest. At first, it whispered softly, my wife's voice, tender and lost, speaking of the house we once shared, of the garden she never finished planting. But soon, her words began to repeat, always the same phrases, as though caught in a loop. It's cold here, Thomas. I waited in the cold. No 10. You'll come for me, won't you? To help. The tone was almost right, yet something in the cadence was wrong. A pause that didn't belong, a slight echo behind each word, as if another voice spoke through her. On the 4th night, I woke to a new sound, not a whisper, not a knock. Singing. A faint hum seeped from the jar, rising and falling like a lullaby, half remembered from childhood. I could not make out the melody, but the rhythm was the same. 3 long notes, a pause, then 3 short. I covered the jar with a cloth, pressed it into a drawer, and still the song persisted, muffled, trembling, alive. By dawn, I was shaking. I went down to the harbor, thinking the salt air might clear my head. Fishermen passed me without a word, faces drawn tight against the wind. Yet even over the sea's roar, I heard it, the faint hum echoing inside my skull. When I returned, the room stank of brine. The jar had moved. It now sat in the center of the table, though I had locked it away. Condensation streaked the inside of the glass in spirals, like fingerprints dragging downward. I took a cloth and wiped it clean. Beneath the fog, letters appeared, not scratched, but formed from the condensation itself. T-H-A-L-E. My name. The glass shuddered, a dull tap-tap-tap sounding from within, faster now, urgent. Then a whisper crawled out, thick and distorted, as though several mouths spoke at once. Thomas, do you remember the chapel? Tasser. My blood ran cold. I remember, I said before I could stop myself. The instant the words left my lips, the knocking began again, furious, echoing from inside the walls, the floor, even my chest. The jar pulsed in rhythm, each knock shaking the air. I seized the jar and hurled it across the room. It struck the wall and rolled beneath the bed, unbroken. The whispers ceased. Silence returned. I fell to my knees, breath ragged, head pounding with the ghost of that rhythm. But in the stillness, I heard something new, faint, distant, from the street below. A voice, singing the same lullaby. I staggered to the window. A woman stood by the gate, facing the sea. Her dress was thin, her hair the color of ash. She was humming, the melody soft, but perfectly in tune with the sound that had haunted me. Mary. The name slipped out before reason could catch it. She turned at once. For a moment, I almost believed the face was hers, or close enough to make me wish it were. But the eyes, they were hollow, polished black, reflecting nothing. She smiled. The sound of glass creaked beneath her lips. Behind me, the jar began to hum again. The floor vibrated underfoot. The singing outside grew louder, splitting into many voices, all chanting the same refrain. You brought me. You brought me. You brought me. Ow. I ran to the door and bolted it, pressing my back against the wood. My heart hammered in my chest, trying to match that impossible rhythm. From within the jar came the faintest whisper, not hers anymore, not anyone's. Let me out. Drastics. And though I tried to cover my ears, I could still hear it. Not from the jar. not from outside, but inside my head. I lasted 2 more nights before breaking. 2 nights of voices that weren't mine, whispering prayers I didn't know, of the jar's song threading through my dreams until sleep felt like drowning. On the morning of the 3rd day, I woke to find every mirror in the room veiled with condensation. The jar sat on the table again, dry and clear. The wax seal was cracked. I told myself I would end it, smash it, hurl it into the sea. But when I reached for the hammer, the whisper came again, gentle, pleading. "Please, Thomas, it hurts. 1?" The sound hollowed me out. It was her voice this time, perfectly shaped, full of the tremor she used to have when fever took her. "You promised you wouldn't leave me." Ticks. My throat tightened. "Mary, the air's quite—" "I'm here," she whispered. "But it's so dark." "Well." The jar pulsed softly, each beat sinking to the rhythm beneath my ribs. I could feel her in me, pulling on every thread of guilt and grief I had ever buried. I brought it to the hearth. The fire was low, red coals breathing faintly. If I could melt the wax, perhaps it would stop. Perhaps she'd find peace. But as I held it close to the heat, the whispers turned to screams, not of pain, of fear. "Not yet. Don't burn me, Thomas. Please. Not the fire. Not a sign." I froze. No demon fears fire like that. The lid bulged outward, glass vibrating. Beneath the surface, a shape twisted fingers pressed against the inside, smearing ash-gray prints. Then a face surfaced, forming from mist and shadow, the mouth wide and gasping, as if to breathe the air I breathed. "Help me," it begged. "Please, wait." I dropped the jar. It struck the stone hearth, cracking from top to base, but not shattering. A hiss of vapor escaped, curling through the air like steam. The voice changed at once deeper, heavier, as though something else had forced its way to the surface. "You brought me," it said, in perfect imitation of my own voice. I staggered back, my spine hitting the wall. The crack along the glass widened with a sound like splitting bone. From within, something moved. The light from the fire dimmed as if consumed. A cold wind rolled through the room, carrying the scent of earth and seawater. I watched in disbelief as a wisp, thin, black, fluid, slipped through the fracture and began to take shape. At first it looked like smoke, but as it thickened, I saw limbs forming, bending the wrong way, moving with the rhythm of breath that wasn't mine. And then, amid the distortion, her voice came again, layered over the deeper tone beneath. "Thomas, I can see you." "Well..." The figure lifted its head. There was no face, only a hollow where the mouth should have been, pulsing softly like the jar before it cracked. I stumbled toward the door, but every step brought another sound. The same knock, knock, knock from the chapel, now hammering in my skull. "Stay," the voice demanded. "You made me. Stay." And the shadow lunged. I fell backward, crashing into the table. The jar rolled beside me, its last shards breaking under my hand. I felt something warm slide over my wrist, thick, like oil, but alive. Then, suddenly, silence. The shape halted mid-movement, trembling. From the corner of the room came a low chant, words I didn't recognize at first, but whose rhythm I knew. Father Rowan's voice. 3 for the gate, 3 for the grave, 1 for the living to hold the name, Mystic. I turned. In the doorway stood his figure, half illumined by the firelight. robes soaked with sea spray, eyes hollow but certain. "You should have destroyed it," he said. "Now it knows your breath." "Why?" The thing turned toward him. The floorboards shuddered as it moved. Rowan raised his hand, the iron key gleaming between his fingers, the same one that sealed the chapel hatch. "Back," he commanded. The shadow screamed. The walls cracked. Windows burst outward, letting in a storm of salt and rain. Then, silence. The shape collapsed, vanishing into a thin line of smoke that slipped back into the broken jar, sealing itself with one last hiss. Rowan staggered forward, the key still in his hand. "It's bound again," he said, voice thin, "but only for a while." "Why?" I fell to my knees beside him, breath ragged. What was it? Was he? He looked at me, expression unreadable. "Not your wife, not mine. Just what waits when faith forgets the words." "Why?" The fire burned clean that night. No shadows moved against the walls. No whispers slid beneath the sound of the wind. The jar lay cracked and blackened on the hearth, the air around it thick with the smell of salt and iron. Father Rowan collapsed into a chair near the window, his robes torn, his hands trembling with exhaustion. The storm outside began to fade, and for the first time in days, I heard something close to silence. "It's done," he said quietly. "We've caged it again. For self." The words felt thin, fragile. I wanted to believe them, as I had once believed his prayers. I nodded, though my gaze drifted toward the ruined glass. Its surface had cooled to a dull gray, but faint lines still pulsed across it, as though veins had been etched beneath the surface. Rowan noticed my stare and said nothing. He only raised a shaking hand and traced the sign of the cross over his chest. We spoke little that night. He took the small guest room, leaving me to the one with the hearth. Before he went, he placed the iron key upon the table between us. "Keep it," he murmured. "If it calls again, answer with silence." "What is this for?" I did not ask what he meant. Sleep came slow and uneasy. I dreamed of the sea, not the bright water of Whitby's coast, but the black tide that rolls beneath the world, where no wind stirs and no light returns. In the dream, something drifted toward me, its face hidden by rippling glass. I reached out and woke to the sound of footsteps. Rowan stood by the fireplace, staring into the ashes. His back was to me, shoulders rigid, the light from the dying embers tracing the outline of his collar. "You should rest," I whispered. He didn't move. "Father." "Nay." Slowly, he turned. His eyes reflected the last glow of the fire, and for an instant, they gleamed not with reflection, but with light from within. "I can still hear it," he said softly, faint, like a prayer whispered through the sea. "In." He pressed a hand against his chest. "Do you hear it too, Thomas?" In Freshen. I listened, and though the wind outside had died, a sound lingered in the silence. A slow, steady tapping, like the faint beat of a heart struggling to remember itself. "It's just your pulse," I said. "You're tired, and could do a..." But even as I spoke, I felt it beneath the floorboards, under the soles of my feet. Knock, knock, knock. Rowan smiled faintly. "You see," it followed, "but it's weak now. We can rest." And Freisht, he turned back to the fire, whispering something under his breath, a fragment of a psalm, maybe, or the echo of one. I wanted to stop him, to demand we destroy what remained of the jar, scatter its ashes, anything, but his voice lulled me, each word stretched, drawn out in the rhythm I had come to dread. And with every syllable, the air thickened again. The ashes in the hearth shifted. A thin stream of smoke rose from the cracks in the jar, coiling upward like breath. Father, he lifted a hand. Let it pass, Thomas. It's only residue. The dead exhale before they sleep. Rend. But the smoke didn't fade. It moved. It brushed across the floor, hurling toward his feet, vanishing beneath the hem of his robe. Rowan flinched once, sharply, and then straightened. The firelight dimmed around him. Thomas, he said after a long silence, you should take the key and leave before morning. The church will want this place cleansed again. What is a nowing? I opened my mouth to argue, but something in his tone stopped me. There was distance in it, and something else. The faint metallic tremor I had once heard in his voice beneath the chapel. Before dawn, he retired to his room. I sat by the dead fire, the key heavy in my hand. The jar was gone from the hearth. Only a faint ring of soot marked where it had lain. Through the thin wall between our rooms, I heard him whispering in Latin, but the words were wrong. The syllables fell backward, as if spoken by a tongue learning how to pray for the first time. Then, silence, and beneath that silence, I could swear I heard 3 soft knocks, answering each other from inside his chest. I awoke to the sound of the sea screaming. It wasn't the cry of waves against the cliffs, nor the storm's howl through the shutters. It was something deeper, vibrating through the stone, echoing in the hollow of my ribs. I sat upright, breath caught in my throat. The sound was coming from his room. I grabbed the key from the table and ran down the short corridor. The door was ajar, light flickering beneath it like the pulse of a dying flame. Father Rowan, well said. No answer, only that slow, rhythmic knocking again. 3 beats, a pause, 3 more. I pushed the door open. The room reeked of salt and candle wax. Every wall was lined with symbols, some drawn in soot, others carved directly into the wood, overlapping until none could be read. The candles had melted into long, black rivers of wax across the floorboards. Rowan was kneeling at the foot of the bed, his back to me, his head jerked slightly with every knock, as though keeping time with it. Father, well, he turned slowly, unnaturally. His eyes had sunk deep into his skull, and his lips were moving soundlessly, forming the same pattern I had heard whispered from the jar. Thomas, he said, voice thin as wire. It found its voice again, known. I took a step closer. We can still fight it. And he smiled, but the expression didn't reach his eyes. You don't understand. It doesn't need the jar anymore. Drowned. He pressed a hand against his chest. Beneath the fabric, something shifted, a faint bulge that rolled under his ribs, pressing outward. It's in here now. It's Mike. He rose unsteadily to his feet. His breath came in bursts, shallow and uneven. The knocking grew louder, faster, as though the thing inside him was growing impatient. You can seal me again, he said. Use the key, the right of Oswin. You remember it. Well for self. I shook my head. If I use it, it'll bind you too. Have, then do it, he whispered, before it takes my tongue nigh. But even as he spoke, his voice deepened, the words slipping, twisting into that same metallic resonance I had heard when the jar cracked. Thomas, It said through him, "You opened the way. Don't close it now." The candles exploded, wax splattering across the walls. The air went thick, vibrating with low, guttural sound, not quite words, but intent. The symbols carved into the wood began to glow faintly, pulsing with the rhythm of his heart. He staggered forward, reaching for me. His hands were trembling, his skin slick with sweat, but his eyes, they were not his anymore. "Let me see you," the voice whispered. "Let me wear you. That..." I backed toward the window. The iron key clutched so tightly in my fist that its edges bit into my palm. "You're not him," I said. "You're what's left. Tames." The thing inside him laughed a hollow, choking sound that made the air itself tremble. He prayed for me, Thomas. He begged for faith, and I answered. "Isn't that what you wanted, too?" And fells. The walls began to warp. The sea outside roared in time with the pounding in his chest. I fell to my knees, trying to remember the chant Rowan had used in the chapel. 3 for the gate, 3 for the grave, 1 for the living to hold the name. 3 for the gate, I whispered. The floorboards beneath him split open. Light poured out, not bright, but red and thick, like blood seen through water. He screamed, half in his own voice, half in the other's. "Finish it, Thomas, and I'll test." 3 for the grave, I cried, raising the key. The light surged upward, swallowing him from the knees down. His hands reached toward me, grasping for the iron key. I took one last breath, pressed it to the floor, and turned it sharply to the left. The sound that followed was not thunder. It was inhalation, the world itself drawing breath. Everything pulled inward, the room, the air, even the light. Father Rowan's body folded into itself, vanishing into the wound in the floor. The sound cut off mid-scream. And then there was silence. When I opened my eyes, dawn had broken. The walls were bare, the carvings gone. The floor was cracked in a perfect circle, as if the wood had melted and hardened again. The key lay beside it, blackened and warm. I reached for it and stopped. Beneath the silence, faint but unmistakable, I heard it. Knock, knock, knock. 3 beats. Pause. 3 again. Only this time, it didn't come from the floor. It came from the pocket of my coat. I reached inside with trembling fingers and pulled out the broken jar. The wax had resealed itself. The glass, though fractured, was whole again. And from within, a whisper, low, familiar, patient. "It's over now, Thomas. Rest." "What is not?" It was his voice this time, Father Rowan's. But behind it, hidden like an echo beneath a prayer, came another. "You brought me, Treaser." The wind outside stilled. The waves fell silent. And for a long, heavy moment, I felt the key in my palm pulse once in time with my own heart. I placed the jar on the windowsill, where the light could touch it, and turned away. Behind me, the faintest sound, tap, 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 followed like a heartbeat, trying to remember its song. I left Whitby at sunset. The cliffs burned red behind me, the sea below glinting like a mirror of blood. The jar sat wrapped in linen inside my satchel, cold but strangely still. For the first time in months, I could breathe without hearing the rhythm behind every breath. The train to Berwick was almost empty. I sat near the rear, facing the window, watching the coastline slide past in silence. The sun dipped, the world darkened, and for a while, the motion of the train became a kind of peace, steady, mechanical, free of heartbeat or prayer. When the ticket conductor passed, I reached for my bag. My fingers brushed the jar through the fabric. It pulsed once faint, like a sigh. I froze. The conductor moved on, humming softly under his breath. The tune was gentle, almost familiar. Then I realized what it was. The same lullaby the jar had sung. 3 slow notes, a pause, 3 short. I turned sharply. The conductor was gone. The carriage behind me was empty. Yet the humming continued, drifting from everywhere at once: the ceiling, the floor, the glass of the window beside me. I looked out. The reflection in the window wasn't mine. It was Father Rowan, his face pale and glassy, lips barely moving as he whispered, 3 for the gate, Thomas, 3 for the grave. The final words blurred, swallowed by static. The train lights flickered. And then, from beneath my seat, knock, knock, knock. The rhythm answered itself from the carriage walls. The glass jar began to shake inside the bag, glowing faintly through the cloth. I stood, heart hammering. Every light on the train went out. The last thing I saw before the darkness closed was my reflection in the window, and behind it, dozens of faces pressing against the glass from the other side, mouthing the same words in perfect unison. 1 for the living, to hold the name, Rico. The train never stopped. The passengers were never found. And somewhere between Whitby and Berwick, if you press your ear to the rails at night, you can still hear it. A faint tapping beneath the ground. Knock, knock, knock. Story 3, the 13th Psalm. I came to Berwick to rest, or perhaps to hide, though I no longer knew what from. The sea had grown too loud in Whitby, its voice too human. I thought inland might offer silence. But silence, I've learned, is never empty. The village sat on the border, half ruined, half asleep. Every house bore the same symbol carved above the door. A small circle surrounded by 12 short lines. The innkeeper told me it was for protection during the singing. Nay, when I asked what she meant, she only smiled and said, "You'll hear it soon enough. Everyone does. Rex." That night, the wind carried voices from the direction of the church low, broken harmonies rising and falling like waves. It wasn't quite music, but it wasn't noise either. I followed the sound through the fog until I saw them. Villagers standing in the graveyard, faces turned upward, mouths moving as one. The words were ancient, the rhythm familiar. 3 long notes, pause, 3 short. I should have turned back. But the closer I listened, the more certain I became. One of those voices was mine. Morning bled through the mist like a bruise. The graveyard was still, the grass, damp with dew, swayed without wind. From somewhere deep beneath the hill came a low vibration, steady, rhythmic, as though the earth itself was breathing in its sleep. The villagers moved quietly, their faces drawn and hollow. None met my eyes. When I asked the innkeeper about the hymn they sang the night before, she crossed herself, her fingers trembling slightly. "We call it the 13th Psalm," she whispered. "We sing when the ground begins to stir." No. I asked what it meant, but she only turned away, murmuring, "It keeps what sleeps from remembering its name." And 424. The church sat at the far end of the village, half swallowed by fog. Its door hung loose, its stone walls glistening with cold. Inside, the air felt damp and heavy. as if something unseen had been weeping for years. Dust shimmered in the pale light, drifting through the holes where stained glass once stood. Beneath the altar, I heard that same faint tremor, a pulse, slow and deliberate, like someone softly drumming their fingers beneath the floorboards. I found a hymnal lying open on the lectern. The ink had bled, the pages warped with moisture, but I could still make out the numbering. Psalm 12, Psalm 14. 13 was missing. A torn edge remained, as if the page had been ripped away in anger or fear. But faint traces of ink bled through to the next leaf crooked symbols, near Latin but not quite, arranged in patterns of threes and pauses. The same rhythm I had heard in Whitby. At dusk, the fog returned, heavier than before. The villagers gathered once more in the churchyard, candles trembling in their hands. Without a word, they began to sing. The melody was wrong, fractured, shifting in and out of harmony. It rose and fell like waves against stone, the pauses too long, the breaths too perfectly timed, and as they sang, the earth answered. The ground shivered. A faint resonance spread through my shoes, up my spine, matching their rhythm exactly. A woman near the front opened her eyes mid-song and looked straight at me. Her pupils were vast and dark. She smiled faintly and whispered, though no breath left her lips. "It hears us, Mencher." When the final note faded, the villagers drifted away without speaking. The fog dissolved, leaving the churchyard eerily clear. I lingered, listening. The silence after the song wasn't silent at all. Beneath the soil, something continued to stir soft, deliberate, patient. Not knocking now, not even moving, but remembering the beat it once kept. And though I told myself it was imagination, I could feel that rhythm begin to echo faintly inside my chest, as if the earth and I were breathing in time. By the third night, the air itself seemed to breathe with the hymn. No one spoke of it openly, but when dusk came, shutters closed in unison, and candles were lit inside every house. The villagers did not wait for the church bell to call them the moment the wind changed. They simply knew. I kept my window open. The song began faintly, seeping through the fog low, uneven, yet measured. It was not sung with devotion, but with obligation. Every verse sounded like a plea disguised as worship. I decided to record it. The small phonograph I carried from Whitby sat on the table beside the bed. I wound it carefully, set the needle, and let it drink in the sound through the open window. The melody wavered between keys, sliding just out of reach of anything human. Sometimes it was a whisper. Other times, it swelled into a harmony so dissonant it scraped the nerves raw. Still, I listened. I had to. When the final note faded, I stopped the recording and replayed it. At first, all I heard was the wind. Then, beneath it, the faint hum of voices, 12 of them, male and female, shifting in uneven breaths. I counted twice to be certain. 12. And then, from the end of the cylinder, came a 13th. A man's voice, barely audible, distant, but perfectly clear. It was mine. I stumbled back from the table, my pulse pounding in my ears. The needle crackled, hot in the groove, looping that one fragment over and over my voice, whispering words I never said. 3 for the gate, 3 for the grave, 1 for the living. I stopped the machine, but the voice continued. It was no longer coming from the device. The sound filled the room, rising from the floorboards, from the air itself. My reflection in the window trembled with it, as though the glass had learned to sing. Unable to bear it, I fled into the night. The village lay still beneath the fog, every window dark, every door bolted. Yet from somewhere distant, the direction of the church, the song began again. I followed the sound, drawn by something deeper than curiosity. The churchyard was crowded. Dozens of villagers stood around the graves, their candles guttering in the wind. Their mouths moved without pause, lips forming shapes too precise to be unplanned. I hid behind a crumbling wall, notebook in hand, trying to transcribe what I heard. But the melody kept changing, rewriting itself faster than I could record. The air trembled with it, vibrating against my skin like the pluck of a string. I could feel the earth shifting underfoot, the stones quivering in time with the song. Then, the pitch dropped, the voices deepened, and the ground opened, not cracked, not split, but inhaled. A wave of cold swept over the congregation, their candles extinguished one by one, leaving only the sound steady, immense, alive. From the dark, someone began to count, not aloud, but in the rhythm of their breath. 12 beats, then silence. And on the 13th, the entire graveyard exhaled. A whisper swept through the fog. Dozens of voices merged into one. "You're late, Thomas. Crazy." I turned and ran, though I could feel that same rhythm pursuing me, rising beneath the soles of my boots, through the ground, through the marrow of my bones. When I reached my room, the phonograph was still spinning, though I had stopped it hours before. The cylinder turned slowly, dragging the needle across the groove. From its horn came the final, impossible verse, the one I hadn't recorded. "We sing to wake. We sing to hear." The 13th voice completes the prayer. Brighter life. The voice was mine again, and behind it a faint rustling, like earth being disturbed from within. The night of the full moon came like a held breath. The air over Berwick was unnaturally still. Even the sea had gone quiet, as though waiting. Clouds rolled in from the east, but stopped above the village, refusing to move. Somewhere, a bell tolled once, then fell silent, though the church had no working bell. I knew before anyone told me that they would sing again. The villagers didn't look at one another as they gathered. They simply arrived, each carrying a candle and moving toward the graveyard as if drawn by some unseen gravity. Their faces glowed faintly with that feverish calm I had come to dread. I followed them. I couldn't stay away anymore. The song had been playing inside my skull for days, a low vibration beneath thought or language. Each time I tried to pray, my lips formed its rhythm instead. The churchyard shimmered under the moonlight. Frost glinted on the stones, and mist curled low around the graves. At the center of it all stood the choir, 12 of them arranged in a perfect circle around a mound of earth that looked freshly turned. The melody began with a single note, long, mournful, like breath drawn through a hollow pipe. One by one, the other voices joined in, weaving around that sound until the air trembled with harmony too precise to be human. I counted the measures unconsciously. 3 slow beats. Pause. 3 shorter. Always the same pulse, always returning. The mound at the center of the circle began to sink. The soil didn't crumble. It lowered smoothly, like a door being pulled inward. And from the darkness beneath came the answering hum. It was alive. I stepped forward, unable to stop myself. The earth seemed to breathe beneath my boots. My name surfaced in the rhythm, soft at first, then clearer. Thomas. 12 voices turned toward me, still singing, their eyes bright as candle flame. They made space in the circle, as though they had been waiting for me. One of them, a woman I recognized from the inn, held out a small black book, the missing page from the hymnal, bound into a cover of worn leather. The 13th Psalm, she said between verses. It was never meant to be written. It was meant to be remembered. Right. Her voice cracked into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. And you already know the words. Well, I shook my head, but the air betrayed me. The melody rose, pressing against my throat until sound escaped. A single note, then another. I was singing, not by choice, by instinct. The words poured out of me like breath I'd been holding too long. The others swayed closer. Their candles flared blue. The ground below pulsed with light, each shimmer matching the beat of the song. We sing to wake, the choir intoned. We sing to hear. Well, the wind whipped through the graves, carrying that refrain into the night. And beneath the sound of their voices, another began to rise deep, resonant, impossible. A voice without body, a voice of earth. The 13th returns, it murmured, vibrating through the soil. The missing verse completes the flesh. 1. The mound split open. A shape began to emerge, pale, indistinct, but listening. I tore myself free from the circle, gasping. My body felt heavy, my chest aching from the effort of silence. Still, my lips moved of their own accord, echoing the final line of the psalm. One for the living, to hold the name. Ready! The voice from below answered in kind. A pulse of air rippled outward, toppling candles, bending grass flat to the ground. The villagers fell to their knees, faces turned skyward in rapture. Their song faltered, then stilled. And in that silence, I heard my own voice continue the melody, clear, strong, in perfect pitch. I pressed my hand to my mouth. My throat moved without my will. Words slipped out, cold and rhythmic. 3 for the gate, 3 for the grave. I backed away, horrified. The ground responded, the mound opening wider, something vast shifting just beneath the surface. The woman with the book stepped forward, eyes wide with ecstasy. Sing, Thomas, you're the 13th. You always were. Tss. The soil at her feet cracked. From the gap rose a faint, human breath, as if the earth itself had lungs. The candlelight flickered out, and in that perfect, deafening darkness, my voice sang the final verse alone, steady, low, and calm, though every part of me screamed to stop. We sing to wake. We sing to hear. One for the living. The last line dissolved into a sound I had heard before, not a knock, not a drum, but the slow, deliberate pulse of something vast beneath the ground, learning to breathe. Morning came pale and trembling, like a fevered sigh. The villagers said nothing of the night before. They rose with the same weary calm as always, sweeping the church steps, tending their fires, greeting me with nods that meant, don't speak. No one mentioned the song. No one dared. The graveyard, too, was silent. The mound I had seen sink into the earth had returned flat, undisturbed, as though nothing had ever moved beneath it. No candles, no footprints, no trace of that impossible hymn. It might have been a dream, I told myself, a nightmare born from too many sleepless nights and borrowed prayers. I almost believed it. For 3 days, the village remained quiet. The mist thinned, sunlight returned, and laughter thin, fragile, drifted from the square. The innkeeper poured me tea one morning and said with cautious relief, "It's ended. The ground's gone still again. Too." She smiled, but her eyes avoided mine. Beneath her sleeve, her wrist trembled. She was lying or trying to convince herself otherwise. That night, I slept for the first time in what felt like years, and that was when I heard it. Not the song, not at first, just breathing. Slow, rhythmic, too measured to be sleep. I opened my eyes to darkness. The window curtains stirred faintly, though no wind moved outside. My chest rose and fell once, twice, and then I realized the rhythm didn't match my heartbeat anymore. It was slower, heavier, and it wasn't mine. I lit the candle with shaking hands. The room looked untouched, the table, the phonograph, my notes spread open across the desk. But from somewhere deep inside me came the faintest hum. It wasn't sound, it was vibration. I pressed a hand to my sternum. The warmth there pulsed in threes long, short, long, the same pattern, the same cadence, the psalm. I staggered to the mirror. My reflection stared back, pale and slick with sweat. My lips were moving, slowly. 3 for the gate. The words escaped in a whisper that wasn't my own. 3 for the grave. I clamped a hand over my mouth. My throat still moved beneath it, forming words I didn't speak. 1 for the living. The final syllable hung in the air, soft as breath. The candlelight flickered once, twice, then steadied. And from the phonograph behind me came the faint scrape of metal. It had turned itself on. The cylinder spun, though I hadn't wound it in days. At first, only static. Then, the melody, the 13th Psalm, began to play. Slower now, warped by the drag of the needle. The voices were faint, distorted, almost lost under the crackle, until mine joined them. I heard myself singing, exactly as I had in the churchyard, every word, every breath, perfect. But overlaid upon that, a deeper tone vibrated beneath the pitch, something inside the recording that didn't belong. The candle dimmed further. I turned toward the sound and saw, reflected faintly in the phonograph's brass horn, a shimmer, a shape. It looked like smoke pressed against glass, rippling to the rhythm of the hymn. And in its center, a faint outline of a face unfinished, forming itself from sound. I slammed my hands over my ears, but the song only grew louder, not through the air, but through me. The words vibrated in my skull, threading through every breath. The innkeeper burst into the room. Her hair was unbound, eyes wide with fear. "You shouldn't listen," she cried. "Once it knows your voice, it doesn't stop. Rio." She lunged for the phonograph, tearing at the cylinder. The machine shrieked, sparks flying, before it went still. Silence fell like a drop of ink spreading in water. For a moment, I thought it was over. Then, in the stillness, she turned toward me. Her lips parted as if to speak, and from her mouth, soft and trembling, came a single line, 3 for the gate. Her eyes widened in horror as the next verse followed, unbidden. 3 for the grave. The melody filled the room again, but this time it wasn't coming from the machine. It was coming from us. We stood there, frozen, the same voice spilling from two mouths. And beneath our feet, the floor began to hum, gentle, patient, alive. By dawn, the village was silent once more. But when the wind passed through the churchyard, it carried with it a faint tune, half human, half memory, rising and falling like breath. It wasn't loud enough to hear unless you listened closely. And when you did, you'd find it wasn't really a song anymore. It was a heartbeat, steady, eternal, waiting for someone to answer. The next night, the singing began without voices. It came from the walls, from the beams, from the hollow spaces between breaths. I could feel it in my bones before I heard it in my ears, a pulse, slow and heavy, pushing through the marrow like a second heartbeat. I left the inn before the dawn, clutching the iron key Father Rowan had left me. It was warm again, almost feverish. The villagers were already walking toward the church, faces blank, eyes glazed as if sleepwalking. They didn't look at me when I joined them. They didn't have to. They knew I belonged there now. The church glowed from within, hundreds of candles lit in perfect symmetry, their flames bending toward the altar. The air shimmered with heat and breath. At the center stood the same mound of earth, freshly turned once more. Beside it, the small phonograph rested on a wooden stool, its brass horn tilted upward like a mouth waiting to sing. I realized then, it had never been recording me. It had been teaching me. 3 for the gate, someone whispered. 3 for the grave, Cryades. Their voices overlapped, one tone sliding into another, until the sound became a single, endless note. My vision blurred, my pulse synchronizing with it. I wanted to run, but my body had already chosen. As I stepped forward, the congregation parted, opening the circle. The mound pulsed faintly, the soil shifting in slow, deliberate breaths. The phonograph clicked once, its needle lowering, and from its horn, my own voice began to sing. Every verse I had ever heard, every word I had tried to forget, echoed back at me smoother now, fuller, accompanied by the invisible choir that lived beneath the earth. I covered my ears, but the sound moved inside me. I could taste it metallic, like blood and salt. We sing to wait, the voice said. We sing to hear, as said. I fell to my knees. The earth trembled. The mound split. From the rift rose a hand pale, boneless, formed from smoke and soil. It reached upward, feeling the air, searching, every candle bent toward it. And beneath that movement, I heard a whisper that froze my blood. 1 for the living, to hold the name and a stacked frame. I understood then. The 13th Psalm wasn't a prayer, it was a ritual, a trade. Each time the villagers sang, they gave it one of their voices, one of their breaths, to keep it sleeping. But I, foolish, desperate, grieving, had given it something greater. I had given it my name, and now it wanted to wear it. The ground burst open. The shape that rose wasn't human, or perhaps it was what humanity looked like when the soul was peeled away. A figure made of sound and shadow, shifting between form and void. Every time I blinked, its outline changed. A man, a woman, a child, all singing the same verse in unison. It leaned forward, voice layered over mine. You sang, Thomas. You are the 13th, Aztec. I could barely breathe. My mouth moved without permission. Finishing the line, it began. 1 for the living. The air collapsed inward. Every candle blew out, plunging the church into utter blackness. Something ancient pressed against my mind, demanding to be let in to fill the empty spaces grief had carved there. I could feel it sliding beneath my skin, whispering through my teeth, shaping my thoughts into melody. If I sang the final verse, it would be whole. But somewhere buried beneath that music, I remembered Father Rowan's voice. A song can be sung backward, Thomas. Faith bends both ways. Chowns! I clutched the iron key in my hand. Its edges bit into my palm until blood ran down my wrist. And I began to hum. Not the hymn as I'd learned it, but reversed. Each word drawn out, each pause stretched until the melody fractured. The sound grated against itself, wrong and discordant, twisting the air into shreds. The figure screamed a sound like glass breaking underwater. The candles flared white, then red. The congregation collapsed to the ground, hands over their ears. The phonograph shrieked, the cylinder spinning faster and faster until it shattered. Still, I kept singing backward, forcing each line out as the thing's form unraveled into dust and light. Here to sing, wake to sing. The soil beneath it turned black. The sound imploded, sucking the air from the room. And in the last echo of that terrible silence, it spoke not with rage, but with a kind of reverence. Then you will hold it, Thomas, forever. I was notent. The mound closed. The candles died. I woke hours later beneath a gray dawn. The villagers unconscious around me, their faces pale but alive. The church was empty. The phonograph was gone. So was the iron key. I tried to speak to call for help, but no sound came out. My throat moved, but nothing followed. And then, faintly, from somewhere deep within me, I heard it. A hum, low and patient, waiting to be sung. Not outside anymore. Inside. I left Berwick that morning, unable to look back. The fields were quiet, the air still, as if the world itself was holding its breath. But every few steps, when the wind passed through the grass, I could feel the rhythm again. Not a song, not a knock, not even a heartbeat. Just the echo of something ancient, breathing in time with mine. I crossed the border into Scotland 2 days later. The air was colder there, cleaner stripped of the thick, humming weight that had haunted Berwick. Each breath felt like a confession. I walked until I found a chapel on a lonely hill, its stone walls dark with age, its bell tower leaning like a weary sentinel. I hadn't planned to stop, but when I reached the door, my knees gave way. I was trembling from exhaustion, from silence, from the terrible peace inside my chest. The priest who answered was old, his voice soft as worn cloth. He listened as I tried to speak, my words emerging in fragments, cracked and raw. Something followed me, I said. I sang, and I can't stop hearing it. As forever K. He nodded slowly. Many who serve the sound believe it ends when the song is over, he murmured. But songs don't end, Thomas. They only change who carries them. Round. My breath caught. I hadn't told him my name. He led me into the confessional, the wood smooth with centuries of hands. The air smelled faintly of wax and dust. Speak your sins, he said from behind the lattice. I began to talk haltingly, brokenly about Father Rowan, about Whitby, about Berwick. But as I spoke, his voice on the other side began to hum. Quietly at first, then louder. 3 slow notes, a pause, 3 short. The rhythm. The words spilled from him like water seeping through cracks. 3 for the gate, 3 for the grave. I froze. My throat burned. Something deep within my chest stirred in answer. Father, I whispered. Please, stop. Right it have something. He didn't. 1 for the living, he sang, to hold the name. Held to. The candles flickered. My reflection in the brass screen wavered, not my own face anymore, but his, smiling gently as he finished the verse. The 13th voice returns. Thing. The hum inside me flared, stretching into melody. My mouth opened before I could resist. And together, in perfect harmony, we sang the last line. Outside, the bell began to ring, softly, rhythmically, as though marking the heartbeat of something newly awake. Story 4. The Lantern of the Dead. The bell followed me to Shrewsbury. It wasn't the same tone as the one in Berwick. This one was softer, almost mournful, as though ringing for a funeral that never ended. Every few hours, just before dusk, it would sound once, no matter where I was in the town. The locals called it the Lantern Bell. They said it marked the hour when the souls of the lost began to wander, searching for the light that would guide them home. At first, I thought it was superstition, an old folk tale clinging to the bones of a forgotten faith. But on my second night, as I passed through the old quarter, I saw it, a single flame flickering inside a small iron cage, hanging from a crumbling stone arch. No wind could touch it. No rain could dim it. It burned with a color I had never seen, pale gold at the edges, dark at the core, like sunlight seen through smoke. A man sweeping the street whispered as I stared, "Don't watch it too long. Stranger, the dead use your eyes to find their way. I will do." And somewhere deep inside me, the humming began again. By the third evening, the lantern had moved. The first night, I saw it hanging by the old arch near the market square. The next, it swayed above the bridge, casting its strange pale light over the slow, black water. And now tonight it burned just outside my window. No one had hung it there. The iron hook it rested on hadn't existed the day before. The air around it shimmered faintly, as if the flame were breathing. Every so often, it flickered, stretching taller, as though something invisible leaned close to feed from it. I told myself it was coincidence, that perhaps there were many lanterns, not one, but the color, that impossible hue between gold and ash, was the same, and the hum I heard when I looked at it, that was the same too. It matched the sound inside my chest. The innkeeper, an old woman with one milky eye, noticed me watching it through the glass. "You've seen it, then," she muttered, setting a cup of tea on the table. "It doesn't come for everyone, tanned Ford." I asked what she meant. She only shrugged, her hands shaking as she poured. "It's called the Lantern of the Dead. It lights itself when the veil thins. For most folk, it stays still, guards the graveyard. But sometimes, when a man's soul wanders too far from his body," she hesitated, "it follows him, to lead him home. When..." I tried to laugh, but the sound caught in my throat. "And if he doesn't follow, have not, then it waits," she said. "And every night it burns closer, wise to ground." Later, I sat by the window, watching the flame dance in the fog. The street was empty. Even the wind held its breath. I counted my heartbeats, steady, slow, but the flicker of the lantern kept perfect time with them. When I held my breath, the light dimmed. When I exhaled, it flared again. It wasn't burning on its own. It was burning with me. I rose, meaning to close the curtains, but a faint sound stopped me, a low ticking, like oil dripping in a lamp, except it came not from outside, but from within the room. The smell of smoke filled the air. I turned toward the desk. My candle, untouched since dusk, had lit itself. Its flame was the same color as the one outside, pale gold, dark at the center. And as it flickered, the glass of the window quivered, carrying a whisper so soft it almost wasn't sound at all. "Not far now, Thomas. Just one more light." Draped her. By the fifth night, I had stopped pretending the lantern was just a trick of light. It no longer waited outside the window. Now it moved when I did. If I walked through the town, I'd catch its glow sliding between alleys, following at the edge of sight, never closer than 10 paces, never farther than 15. Always patient, always burning. The townsfolk had begun avoiding me. Mothers pulled their children indoors as I passed. Old men at the tavern stopped their talk mid-sentence, heads bowing as though in silent prayer. They knew what it meant to be followed by that light. It started with the footsteps. Late one evening, I heard them in the corridor outside my room, slow, deliberate, bare feet against old wood. I waited, holding my breath, listening. Step, step, pause. When I opened the door, no one was there. Only the faint scent of smoke and the echo of someone breathing just behind me. The next night, the breathing grew louder. It came in short bursts, uneven, as though someone tried to imitate the rhythm of a living man but couldn't quite manage it. I would lie in bed, eyes shut tight, feeling the air shift near my face, cold one moment, warm the next. When I turned toward it, there was nothing. But the flame outside would flicker, bending sharply toward the window, as if something unseen had moved between it and me. And every time it did, I felt the faintest pull at my chest, a tug beneath the ribs, small at first, then sharper, as though a thread connected my heart to the fire. I began walking the streets at night, unable to stay still. The lantern followed, its light stretching long shadows across the cobblestones. With each turn I took, I heard others moving soft footfalls in perfect harmony with mine. Once, I stopped abruptly. So did they. I whispered into the fog. "Who's there?" "2K." The answer came not as a voice, but a sigh, hundreds of them, exhaled together, carried on the wind. The sound was almost beautiful, like distant surf, but beneath it was something else, a dry, scraping, the shuffle of feet dragging over stone. Figures began to take shape in the mist, not solid, not whole. Faces without eyes, arms fading into smoke. They gathered around the lantern's glow, drawn like moths, their forms trembling at the edge of sight. Then I noticed the pattern. Each time the flame drifted to a new place, the bridge, the square, the churchyard gate, one of the shadows would vanish. Not dissipate. Follow. I saw it with my own eyes. A shape stepping into the light, its outline twisting like paper burning, then collapsing inward until only the fire remained. And when the glow brightened, I heard it, the sound of breathing joining mine. For every soul that disappeared into that flame, another exhalation filled the space around me. They were following me now. By midnight, the sound of footsteps echoed wherever I went, sometimes behind me, sometimes ahead, a disjointed parade of invisible companions. The rhythm matched the beating in my chest so perfectly I couldn't tell which belonged to me anymore. I turned a corner near the old cemetery and froze. The lantern hung there, suspended above the gate. The air beneath it shimmered like heat, though the night was cold enough to frost the ground. And within that glow, I saw them a dozen faces, half-formed, flickering in and out of existence, their mouths opened and closed in silent prayer. Each time the flame flared, one face faded, as if consumed. A moment later, the breathing around me deepened stronger, closer, more human. I stepped back, trembling. "What do you want?" I whispered. The flame stretched taller, thin and trembling, and a voice mine, but distant, hollow, answered from the dark. "Light remembers those who forget to die. Asdi." The words rolled through me like thunder swallowed by the lungs. I ran. The lantern followed. Its glow chased me through the narrow streets, bending with every corner I turned, hovering above every door I passed until finally, exhausted, I collapsed at the edge of town. The moment I fell to my knees, the flame steadied, floating just an arm's length away. It pulsed once, twice, and I understood it wasn't chasing me at all. It was leading. It took me 6 nights to gather the courage. 6 nights of running from that glow, of hearing the soft drag of feet behind me, of waking to find the lantern hanging closer until I could no longer tell whether it was outside the window or burning quietly inside my head. I decided I couldn't flee it any longer. If it wanted me, it would have to take me while I was awake. That night, fog rolled through the streets of Shrewsbury like smoke from a great unseen fire. The moon hung low, distorted, its light the same sickly gold as the lantern's flame. I followed the sound of metal creaking slow, steady until I found it at the edge of the old graveyard, swaying from a rusted hook above the gate. The fog parted around it like water. No wind, no movement, yet the lantern rocked gently, its light breathing in and out. I could see shapes flickering within the flame, brief flashes of faces, eyes half-formed, mouths opening in silent exhale. Every few seconds, the glow dimmed as if drawing breath, then flared again, brighter, as though it had inhaled the night. My first instinct was to pray, but the words faltered before leaving my tongue. The air here made speech heavy, sacred syllables sinking into silence before reaching the air. So I stepped closer instead. Each footfall seemed to echo far longer than it should. With every step, I felt the temperature drop, my breath crystallizing before me. When I was close enough to touch it, I noticed something strange. The flame did not flicker. It shifted, folding inward like a turning eye. And then, within the center of that light, I saw it. A face. At first, I thought it was one of the spirits, pale, blurred, its features rippling like candle wax. But then it sharpened. The lines became familiar. The slope of the brow, the scar above the lip, the hollow in the cheek. My own face, burning in miniature, staring back at me from inside the flame. It smiled. The air trembled. A faint whisper rose from within the lantern, hoarse, dry, layered with 100 voices, all speaking through the same mouth. Thomas, Tu Filey, my name, drawn out like smoke through ash. I staggered back. The flame brightened, pushing against the glass as though eager to reach me. Thomas, it said again, you've come at last. Why? What are you? I whispered. The smile widened. The sound that followed wasn't quite laughter, more like the cracking of embers. The light remembers. You burned once, and it learned your name. Quieted into's recht time. I took another step back, but the lantern swung toward me, as if caught by invisible wind. The glass rattled in its frame. Shadows rippled across the ground, shifting like a tide of black water. From behind me came the sound of footsteps, dozens of them, soft and bare, circling closer. I turned. The dead from the graveyard stood among the stones, not whole outlines of smoke and bone, drifting shapes that moved without sound. Their faces were half lit by the lantern's glow, mouths open in silent song. Each one exhaled in perfect rhythm. With every breath they gave, the flame within the lantern grew stronger. "They keep me alive," the face said from the fire, "but I need a name to stay. A living breath. Yours will do." Azact. The glass bulged outward, hairline cracks spreading across its surface. The smell of burning iron filled the air. The ground beneath my feet quivered. The shapes drew closer, their hollow faces watching, waiting. "You don't belong here," I said. "You're not light. Your hunger was." The reflection tilted its head the same way I did when I was curious. And what is a flame but hunger that learned to shine? Well, the lantern's glass shattered. A column of light surged upward, wrapping around me like smoke turned solid. The air filled with the sound of breathing, hundreds of lungs pulling at once. My chest tightened until I couldn't tell which breath was mine. And then the warmth. Gentle at first, like standing near a hearth, then hotter, sharper. Inside the light, I saw my reflection again, this time full-sized, standing a few feet away, glowing faintly. It raised a hand, mirroring mine exactly. "Step in," it whispered. "Let's be one again. No friss." I don't remember running, only the cold that replaced the heat. I woke lying among the gravestones, dawn creeping pale over the hills. The lantern hung empty above the gate, its flame gone. But when I touched my chest, the skin there was warm, faintly glowing, pulsing to a rhythm I couldn't silence. And when I leaned over the puddle at my feet, the reflection that looked back at me smiled first. For a time, I believed it was over. The lantern no longer burned above the graveyard gate. The townsfolk returned to their routines, voices returning to the market, laughter spilling again from the tavern doors. Even the air felt lighter, as though the town itself had exhaled after holding its breath for too long. I told myself that the warmth beneath my ribs, that slow pulse I could still feel, was nothing more than exhaustion, a trick of memory. But I couldn't ignore the way the light followed me in small, impossible ways. At first, it was nothing, a flicker across glass, a shimmer at the corner of my vision. When I passed mirrors, I thought I saw the faintest glint of gold inside my eyes, not bright, but deep, as if something beneath the surface caught the light where no light should reach. I stopped looking at my reflection. Yet at dusk, every window became a mirror, and in every one, I could see myself standing just slightly wrong. My movements lagged by half a breath, a heartbeat's delay subtle enough to doubt, too precise to dismiss. When I lifted my hand, my reflection lingered. When I turned my head, it hesitated before following. The nights grew restless again. Sometimes I'd wake to the sound of faint ticking, not from a clock, but from inside the room, a soft, metallic pulse, as if a lantern's frame were shifting in its sleep. Once, I found the air thick with the smell of smoke, No fire burned, yet the curtains quivered in waves of heat. The pattern on the wall, a trembling halo of gold, pulsed gently, as though cast by a flame that wasn't there. The rhythm matched my breathing. Or perhaps my breathing matched it. On the 7th night, I lit a candle to test a thought I'd tried to ignore. The moment the wick caught, the flame turned that same unnatural color, pale at the edges, dark at the core. And when I leaned closer, I saw movement inside it. Not faces this time, not smoke. Just the faint outline of a figure, small at first, blurred, but slowly forming. The longer I stared, the clearer it became, until I recognized its shape. Me. The same tilt of the head, the same scar along the cheek. My reflection burning quietly inside the fire. I blew the candle out. The darkness that followed felt alive, thick, pulsing, almost liquid. My heart raced, but the rhythm it kept wasn't my own anymore. It was slower, steadier, the way a bell might toll underwater. When I stepped back from the table, I saw my shadow stretch long across the wall. Then, slowly, deliberately, it turned its head toward me. I froze. The shadow smiled. Just a slight curl at the corner of its mouth, subtle enough that I might have imagined it. But then it blinked. Once. Out of sync. The following morning, I sought the innkeeper. She wouldn't meet my eyes. The light doesn't die. You know, she said quietly, hands trembling around her cup. It moves on, from flame to flesh, from glass to gaze, to fronding. I felt her stare then, sharp and knowing. You look pale, Mr. Hale. Are you sleeping at all? Asked. I lied. I'm fine. To fire. She smiled faintly. That's what they all say, before the glow turns steady. Is not o'er the says, the not who is not ords. That night, I avoided mirrors altogether. But the glow didn't need glass anymore. It came from within. When I closed my eyes, I saw the lantern's flame imprinted on the darkness behind my lids, pulsing softly, gold bleeding into black. When I opened them again, the world seemed dimmer, as though my sight had grown too bright to belong in it. And somewhere behind me, though no one else was there, I heard a breath. Steady, slow, a perfect echo of my own. At dawn, I fled Shrewsbury. The streets were silent, the air thick with mist. But as I passed the old graveyard one last time, I saw something glimmer faintly above the gate. Not a lantern, not yet. Just a small, golden shimmer, like the memory of a flame waiting for something to breathe it alive again. I kept walking, and for the first time, the light in my chest pulsed faster, as if pleased. I left Shrewsbury before the sun had fully risen, hoping distance might quiet the light. But it traveled with me. No matter how far I walked, I could see the glow faintly in my peripheral vision, a dim shimmer that lived not behind me or before me, but within. When I blinked, the world pulsed gold for half a heartbeat. When I exhaled, the fog carried warmth. I no longer feared the dark. The dark feared me. By the time I reached the moors, the air was heavy with a scent like burnt honey. My breath came out in visible waves, glowing faintly, as though I exhaled smoke that refused to fade. Every step left faint light on the grass, footprints smoldering with a dim amber hue. I stopped trying to hide it. When the wind rose, It carried whispers. At first I thought it was only the reeds brushing against each other, but then words began to form between the gusts. Lantern bearer, keeper of the path. The dead are wandering. Light the way. Raid. Their voices wove around me, neither pleading nor commanding. And beneath their tone came another sound, the slow rhythm of feet moving in unison, hundreds of them, far behind the fog. They were following the light. They were following me. At dusk, I reached an abandoned chapel on the cliffside, little more than stone ribs against the sky. I went inside, seeking silence, though even silence now trembled with faint song. The air shimmered around me. The faint pulse beneath my ribs throbbed brighter, casting faint illumination across the walls. There was a cracked mirror beside the altar. I hadn't seen my reflection in days. I forced myself to look. What stared back wasn't entirely me. The outline was mine. Yes, the same tired face, the same hollow eyes, but within the pupils burned a steady golden light. Veins of brightness traced along my neck, down my hands, as though fire had learned to live under skin. My reflection smiled before I did. I stumbled back, breath ragged. "You're not real," I whispered. The reflection's mouth moved with mine, but its voice came from everywhere, gentle, calm, and utterly wrong. "I am what you carried home, Thomas. You opened the gate. You gave me breath. Trains. You're the lantern. Enter hell. Not anymore. You are. What is sound?" The room warmed as I spoke. The walls shimmered with light that had no source, spreading outward from my body. Outside, the fog rolled closer, shapes stirring within it, hundreds of figures, faint, weightless, drifting toward the chapel, the air filled with the sound of breathing, in perfect rhythm with mine. "They need light," the reflection whispered. "They need you, real to know. And if I refuse, as say," the smile widened, "then they will wander forever, and you will burn alone. Rasher." The door burst open under the wind. The dead filled the threshold, outlines of smoke and memory, faces erased by time. They gathered silently, their forms trembling with hunger, drawn to the glow that bled from my chest. One by one, they began to bow. Each time one lowered its head, a spark of light leapt from me into them, small at first, like embers carried by a breeze. But the more they took, the brighter they became. My knees buckled under the drain. The heat inside me swelled, searing from within. "Stop," I gasped. The reflection in the mirror leaned forward, its eyes blazing like twin suns. "You lit the path. You can't unlight it. Way." The chapel's walls blazed with reflected fire. The shapes of the dead shimmered in gold, not peaceful, not holy, but desperate. They clawed toward the flame, toward me, whispering my name as if it were salvation. "Thomas, Thomas, Thomas." Their voices grew until the sound became a single roaring breath. The mirror shattered, scattering pieces of me across the floor. I crawled toward the altar, the iron key heavy in my pocket, the same one Father Rowan had once given me. Its edges cut my fingers as I clutched it. If the light had passed into me, then I could seal it the same way he had sealed the voice beneath the chapel. Not into stone this time, into flesh. I pressed the key against my chest. The heat surged through me like molten air, veins blazing beneath the skin. My reflection, what was left of it, whispered from the shards on the floor. "Don't. The world needs its light. Trecht, not this kind." One, friends. I turned the key. The sound that followed was not a scream. It was release. The fire rushed outward, pouring through every crack in the chapel, sweeping across the cliff like a wave of dawn. For a moment, every shadow on the moors shone gold. The shapes of the dead flared into brilliance, faces filled with relief, then dissolved into the wind like ash carried home. When the light faded, only darkness remained. I woke to the smell of rain. The walls were cold again, the mirror gone. The key lay beside me, blackened, fused into a shape that no longer turned. My hands were burned, the skin beneath them dull and gray. But the light was gone, completely gone. For the first time in years, I felt empty, not in pain, not afraid, only hollow in the way a lantern feels when its wick has burned out. I rose and stepped outside. The sea below was calm. The fog had lifted. The night sky above was dark, starless, infinite. And far, far away near the horizon, I saw a single golden spark drift upward, faint but steady, as if something unseen still remembered the way I used to breathe. They buried me on the cliffs above Shrewsbury. At least, that's what the villagers said, though I doubt there was much left to bury. The chapel burned for 3 nights straight, its light seen as far as the Welsh border. Some called it a miracle. Most refused to speak of it at all. When the fire died, only the ocean remained calm, empty, reflecting nothing. For a time, the world was free of the lantern's glow. Or so it seemed. Weeks later, in a small village farther north, a boy wandered the edge of a field after a storm. His boots sank into soft soil as he followed a faint glimmer half buried in the mud. He bent down and found a piece of metal blackened, twisted, cold to the touch. It looked like part of a key. When he brushed the dirt away, the metal shimmered faintly, as though remembering light. He slipped it into his pocket. That night, as he lay in bed, a soft glow leaked through the fabric of his coat gold, trembling, pulsing gently in time with his breathing. The boy sat up, holding the fragment in both hands. It throbbed once warm, almost alive. A whisper rose from the dark corner of the room. "The way is open." The boy turned, eyes wide. In the small mirror by his bedside, his reflection blinked out of time with him. For an instant, its pupils flared with a pale golden light bright enough to catch the edge of the glass and make it burn. Outside, the wind stilled. The cattle in the fields stirred restlessly, snorting and stamping as if feeling a heat that wasn't there. And in the distance, somewhere far below the cliffs, a single bell rang, slow, hollow, patient. 3 times. The boy smiled without knowing why. The flame always finds another keeper. It only waits for someone willing to see it. And when they do, the world burns anew. Story 5. The Bell That Counted the Dead. They say the bell of St. Hather's only rings for the dying. It hangs alone in the marshland between Shrewsbury and the coast, a rusted thing, black with age, tethered to no tower, no church, no hand to pull the rope. Yet when the mist rolls in from the sea, it tolls once, twice, sometimes 3 times. And each time it does, someone nearby stops breathing. No one sees them fall, no wound, no sign of struggle. They simply exhale and never draw the next breath. The villagers call it the bell that counts the dead. They believe it was forged to keep tally of souls lost to the plague centuries ago. that its ringing keeps the balance between the living and the gone. But lately, the bell has begun to ring more often. Sometimes at dawn, when the fields are still. Sometimes at night, when the mist hides the sky. And each time it sounds, a faint golden shimmer ripples through the fog, like the echo of fire long extinguished. Some whisper that the flame from Shrewsbury has learned to speak in sound now, that it's calling names, and one of those names is Thomas Hale. I woke in the marsh, half buried in silt and cold. The sky was a dull gray bruise, the air thick with mist, reeds bent under the weight of dew, whispering softly against one another a language older than words. For a long moment, I couldn't tell whether I was above ground or beneath it. When I finally pushed myself upright, mud clung to my hands like wet ash. My lungs ached, but there was no breath, no rise or fall in my chest, only stillness. And yet, I lived, or something close to it. The first sound I heard was the bell. It rolled through the fog in long, uneven waves, a deep, hollow tone that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The air shivered with each toll, the water trembling in small, perfect circles. I counted. 1, 2, 3. Each note lingered longer than it should have, dissolving into the silence like a heartbeat held too long. When it faded, the world remained utterly still. Then faint, but distinct, came the gasping cry of someone far away. A man, maybe. A life slipping out of reach. And in that breathless instant, I heard something new, the beat of a heart, not mine, someone else's. It came from the edge of the marsh, where two fishermen knelt beside a boat, unaware of me, watching. I could hear their hearts as clearly as if my ear pressed to their chests, one fast and anxious, the other steady, indifferent. Each thud sent a pulse of warmth through me. I stepped closer. The mud didn't sink beneath my weight. My reflection in the water was faint, blurred, and when I reached down, the ripples bent away from my fingers instead of parting. The bell tolled again. One single note. The air vibrated. One of the fishermen froze mid-motion, mid-breath, and fell forward into the water without a sound. The other shouted his name, shaking him, but the body didn't stir. The heart I'd been listening to, that steady rhythm, had stopped. And as it stopped, something inside me stirred, like a spark caught in smoke. Warmth filled my chest. For a heartbeat, I thought I could breathe again. But when I tried, no air came. Only a faint echo, a sound not made by lungs, but by the memory of them. The surviving fisherman looked up then, eyes wide, as if sensing me through the fog. He couldn't see me, not truly, yet his heart raced, pounding loud enough to drown the wind. And for a moment, I felt hunger. Not for food, nor for warmth. For that sound. The bell rang a third time. And somewhere deep within the mist, I whispered without meaning to, one for the living. The words left no breath behind them. Only silence. The bell didn't stop that night. Every few hours, it would toll again, one long, hollow note that rippled through the fog, sinking into my bones like a command only I could hear. Each time it rang, the world shifted a little more out of rhythm. And each time, another heart went silent. By the second night, I had learned to hear them all, not through walls or distance, but through the air itself. Every beat within the marshland sang like a drum played beneath my skin. The closer I stood to the living, the louder they became. A child's heart was fast, uncertain, a fluttering bird. An old woman's was slow, tired, stubborn in its rhythm. Somewhere deeper in the fog, a horse's gallop thudded in steady time. And beneath them all, a single tone lingered, the faint metallic resonance of the bell. It pulsed like breath, though I had none. It counted the living as if keeping score. I wandered the edge of the water, searching for the bell itself, but there was no tower, no rope, no sign that it had ever hung from anything man-made. The sound came from beneath the marsh, deep under the reeds, as if the earth itself were ringing hollow. The closer I drew to the center, the stronger the pull became. My body thrummed with each toll, veins glowing faintly under the skin like thin threads of dying light. And with that light came memory. Every life the bell claimed, I saw flashes of it. A man collapsing mid-step on a dirt road, a woman dropping her teacup, its porcelain shattering before she did, a child whose laughter turned to silence halfway through a breath. When their hearts stopped, the final beat echoed inside me, absorbed and held like a note in a song I hadn't meant to sing. The more it happened, the more alive I felt, and the less human. On the third day, I reached a stretch of dry ground where the fog thinned enough to see the horizon. A small chapel ruin stood there, its walls blackened with soot, its bell tower collapsed. At its center lay the source of the sound, a bell half buried in mud and moss. The metal was cracked, eaten by rust, yet it glowed faintly from within that same pale gold I had carried in my chest. My name was etched into the side, Thomas Hale. The letters shimmered as though freshly carved. When I touched the surface, the metal was cold, but beneath that coldness, something moved, a faint vibration. Then the ringing began again, not through the air this time, but from inside me. The first toll was gentle, almost kind. The marsh trembled in reply. The second toll grew louder. I could hear the hearts of everyone in the village 2 miles away stutter for a beat. The third toll struck, and one of those hearts, just one, went still. I gasped, or tried to. My chest tightened, but no air came, only a rush of warmth spreading through me, a pulse, not my own, filling the hollow where breath should have been. I dropped to my knees. The bell's glow spread through the mud, veins of gold crawling toward me. And I understood. It wasn't counting the dead. It was calling them. And I was the one answering. The next time it rang, I didn't resist. I listened. Through the fog, I heard every heart falter for an instant. A single skipped beat in unison. The sound was beautiful in its symmetry, the pause between life and death. And in that moment of silence, I felt something step closer behind me. Not a ghost. Not the living. Something between. It leaned near my ear and whispered, voice like metal on wet stone. You toll now, Thomas. The bell breathes through you. I pressed my hands to my ears, but the sound wasn't outside anymore. It lived within, steady, resonant, patient. Every time it pulsed, a new heartbeat in the distance slowed to match mine and then stopped. The fog rolled thicker, golden at the edges. Somewhere far off, the villagers began to scream. But to me, it only sounded like music. By the fourth night, I could no longer tell where the sound ended and I began. The bell rang without pause, soft, steady, each note rolling through the mist like a heartbeat too large for the world to contain. Its rhythm lived inside me now, matching the pulse that replaced my breath. Every toll carried a name. Every name became a silence. And with each silence, I felt stronger. That was how I knew it had to stop. I returned to the chapel ruin at dawn. The marsh glistened beneath a shroud of fog, the water rippling with faint gold veins that stretched outward from the bell's resting place. The sound was quieter here, not gone, but inward, as if the bell were sleeping between heartbeats. The air felt thick, syrupy with warmth. When I stepped onto the mound of mud that half buried it, the metal shivered underfoot. "You should have stayed in the dark," a voice murmured. It came not from behind me, but from within the bell itself, the vibration shaping words in the air. The tone was familiar, calm, unhurried. My own voice. I knelt, my reflection flickering faintly in the curve of the metal. "You're not real," I whispered. "You're an echo." And Fallent. The reflection smiled, distorted by the rippling water. "Echoes are all that remain, Thomas. We are what the world remembers between deaths. And for Rajan, I didn't ask to be part of this. Well, you answered. The dead don't beg to be called, you heard them. You listened, Natav." The bell pulsed beneath my hands, a vibration so deep it rattled my teeth. I gripped the rim and shouted over the hum. "Then I'll silence you. Why?" The ground responded instantly. Mud churned under my feet. Reeds bent backward as if recoiling from the air itself. The bell's tone deepened, rumbling like thunder trapped beneath the earth. I seized a broken iron rod from the chapel's rubble and raised it high. The glow from the bell brightened, reflecting in the water, blinding me. For a moment, I saw the faces of those it had taken, hundreds of them, blurred and waiting, staring from the rippling surface. When I struck, the sound that followed was not metal on metal, but something wet. The bell didn't crack. It breathed. A tremor rolled through me. My ribs burned. My spine arched as the vibration found a new path upward, inward, folding into the hollow of my chest. The bell stopped glowing. The light moved beneath my skin. "There," the voice whispered from within. "You've brought me home again." And 10. I dropped the iron rod. My fingers were trembling, my vision dimming around the edges. I looked down. A faint shimmer glowed through my ribs, each pulse matching the bell's rhythm exactly. The realization came like drowning. The bell wasn't an object anymore. It was inside me. The sound grew louder, beating against my bones from the inside out. I fell to my knees, gasping though there was no air to draw. Every pulse sent a shudder through the ground, rippling across the marsh like invisible thunder. "Stop. You can't stop a heart once it's found a rhythm." Well, my voice grew clearer now, no longer echoing from outside but forming behind my teeth, beneath my tongue. "You toll now, Thomas. You count what's left. And so, no, you are the bell. Buddy 10. The pain subsided, replaced by a strange stillness. I pressed a hand to my chest and felt the vibration continue, soft, steady, endless. And then, through the fog, I heard them, footsteps. Villagers, dozens of them, drawn by the sound. Their hearts beat in unison, each thud ringing faintly inside my skull. I wanted to warn them, to run, but the bell within me answered before I could speak. A deep toll rolled through the marsh. One single note. The world held its breath. Half the hearts I heard went silent. The villagers fell without screams. They simply folded into the reeds. Still as wax figures, the survivors stumbled back in horror, crossing themselves, shouting my name as if it still belonged to the man I once was. The sound that came out of me in reply wasn't speech, it was resonance. A single, beautiful chime. When the echo faded, the fog shimmered with a faint gold hue. The bell within my chest quieted for a moment, content. I stood among the still bodies, trembling. My reflection shimmered in the shallow water, eyes glowing faintly. And when the next toll began, I didn't hear it through the air anymore. I felt it, deep in my bones, in the rhythm that no longer belonged to any god, only to me. For a while, I believed I had silenced it. After that last toll, the marsh lay still. The fog thinned, revealing the bruised sky above and the glimmer of stagnant pools. No sound followed but the whisper of the wind. The bell had vanished beneath the mud, or perhaps into me, and I felt, for the first time in days, something close to peace. The villagers buried their dead and avoided my eyes. None spoke the word curse, but their silence named it for them. I left before sunrise, walking until the reeds gave way to open field. By nightfall, I found an empty cottage on the edge of the wood. I built a fire. For the first time since Whitby, I slept without hearing the bell. When I woke, I almost believed I was free. Days passed quietly. The air seemed cleaner, sharper. I chopped wood, boiled water, tried to make myself small in the world again. The glow beneath my skin had faded to a faint warmth, pulsing only when I strained to listen. My heart made no sound, but I learned to live with silence. Until the dreams began. In the first, I stood knee-deep in water under a moonless sky. The marsh stretched endlessly. No stars, no wind, only the faint shimmer of gold beneath the surface. Something moved below, slow, patient, and every time it brushed against my legs, I heard a note, not loud, but perfect. Dum, dum, dum. When I woke, the sound followed me into waking faint, muffled, as though coming from another room. I searched the cottage, turning over every loose board, every pot, every nail. The sound was nowhere. Yet each night it returned. Always the same rhythm. Always the same pulse. By the end of the week, the sound grew stronger. Not from outside, from within. When I sat still, I could feel it reverberating through the floorboards, rattling spoons on the table, trembling the air itself. It wasn't constant. It came and went in soft waves, as though something within me were practicing restraint. And every time it pulsed, the air in the room seemed to thin. Once, while fetching water from the well, I noticed a bird, a black rook, perched nearby. As I reached for the bucket, the bell within me gave a low, involuntary hum. The rook fell dead before it hit the ground. I stopped leaving the house. I ate little, slept less. But the villagers had begun to notice. They came sometimes to the edge of the clearing, calling out for the wanderer from the marsh. I could hear their hearts beating as they spoke faint, delicate, like the ticking of distant clocks. I begged them not to come closer. They didn't listen. The sound escaped me again that night. A single, low toll, barely audible. And in the morning, I found 3 of them lying by the trees, faces peaceful, skin pale, eyes fixed on the dawn they'd never see. Their hearts were quiet. I knelt beside them, pressing my hands to their chests, searching for even a flicker of life. Nothing. But when I pulled my palms away, I saw faint gold dust where my skin had touched theirs. I tried everything to silence it. I held my breath until my vision blurred. I plunged my head into water, thinking if I drowned the echo, the world might go still again. But the sound remained, beating softly through my ribs. Not cruel, not angry, simply patient. Counting, always counting. That night, I woke to find the cottage full of light. Not the warm flicker of fire, something softer, deeper, as though the walls themselves were glowing. I rose from bed and saw shadows in the corners. People, the ones I'd taken. They didn't speak. They didn't blame me. They only stood and listened. And beneath their silence, I realized the bell wasn't tolling anymore. It was breathing. Through me. With every pulse of that quiet light, I could feel their stillness feeding into mine, as if they were waiting for the next count to begin. By morning, the glow had faded. The cottage smelled faintly of rain and ash. I sat in the silence for hours, afraid to move, afraid to listen. But eventually, I noticed it faint, steady, impossible to deny. My chest was moving, not with breath, with rhythm, and somewhere deep inside that sound, faint but unmistakable, came the echo of a voice I had tried to forget. The bell tolls where the living hide. Thomas, you can't silence what was made to keep time. Will present. By the time the frost came, I had stopped pretending I was still among the living. My reflection no longer showed breath misting the glass, only a faint, steady shimmer behind the ribs, light caged in flesh. The sound had grown constant now, faintly audible to the ear. It throbbed beneath everything, wind through the trees, the creak of the cottage walls, the pulse of the river beyond the fields. The bell had learned to sing through me. Each night, its rhythm reached farther. I would wake to find birds fallen silent on their perches, deer frozen mid-step in the snow, the forest still as a held breath. The world itself seemed to flinch each time my heart struck its note. And so I knew I couldn't stay here. The further I walked, the fewer hearts the bell would hear. I would go where no life could answer it, bury myself so deep that even sound would die before finding me. The moors were frozen glass when I crossed them, the sky heavy with snow. The bell rang inside me with every step, soft but unrelenting, echoing through the hollow of my chest. Sometimes, through the wind, I heard voices carried on the rhythm, not words, just breaths, the dead I had taken, walking beside me, unseen. Their silence followed like a second shadow. For 2 days I walked, until the land fell away into a pit of black stone and water, an abandoned mine that the locals once called the Earth's Throat. They said the tunnels went so deep you could hear the ocean moving beneath the world. If there was a place sound could die, it would be here. The descent was endless. The air grew thick and stale. My steps echoed back to me, returning seconds too late, warped by the distance. The light from my lantern dimmed, fighting against the dark. And beneath it all, the bells hum. Not from within anymore, from around. As though the walls themselves had begun to resonate. I walked until my body trembled from exhaustion. When I reached the deepest chamber, I knelt. The ground pulsed faintly beneath my palms, not with warmth, with recognition. This was where it wanted me to be. I pressed my hand to my chest. The light flared in answer. bright enough to burn through the fabric. The toll rose higher, clearer, shaking dust from the ceiling. "Enough," I whispered. "You've counted enough. Now, not yet." The voice came from everywhere, from the stone, the air, the marrow of my bones. There are still hearts beating above, still time unmeasured makes us. Then take mine, end it here. What? You misunderstand, Thomas. You were never meant to stop the count. You were meant to begin it. One self-active night. The walls trembled. Cracks spidered across the rock. From them seeped golden light, thin and trembling. The sound swelled until it became unbearable, the bell ringing through the mountain itself. "Let it go," the voice said gently. "Let the world keep time. Have a quiet." I fell to my knees, hands over my ears, screaming without breath, but no sound came out. Only another toll louder than before, shaking the stone loose above me. The mine began to collapse. Through the roaring dust, I saw them, the dead, pale and luminous, drifting down through the falling earth like ash caught in wind. Their faces were calm now, their mouths open in song. Each note that left them added to the bell's voice, building into something vast and terrible and beautiful. I realized then, the bell wasn't just a sound. It was the heartbeat of everything that had ever lived, and I was only its echo. There was no stopping it. But there was still a choice. I took the iron key, blackened, cracked from my coat. Its edges were still warm. I pressed it to my chest again, over the place where the light pulsed. "Seal it," I whispered. "Seal me. Chasers ever find." The key sank through flesh without pain. The light surged, filling the chamber with blinding brilliance. And the bell for the first time missed a beat. The silence that followed was absolute. No wind, no echo, no sound of falling stone. Only darkness. Then, faintly, a voice. "Thomas," through a child's voice, distant, curious. "Why is the bell so quiet now?" As Sabi ate, the light burst from my chest one last time, pouring outward like sunrise forced through a keyhole. It filled the tunnels, the cracks, the soil above rising through the ground until it reached the surface. And when it faded, the world above was still. For the first time in centuries, no one died that day. They say the bell of Saint Hathers has not rung since. The marsh is silent, the air clean, the dead at peace. But sometimes, when the wind crosses the moors at dusk, people claim to hear a single low hum buried in the earth, faint, patient, almost tender. If you listen too long, you might feel it underfoot, matching the rhythm of your own heart. And for one brief, breathless instant, you'll think you hear someone whisper, "One for the living, and is not it is for hide be quild and live." It was nearly a century before anyone entered the mine again. A team of archaeologists came from York, tracing rumors of a buried chapel and a bell that once counted the dead. The villagers warned them away, but the young rarely believe the old. They went down at noon, torches flickering, ropes creaking as the earth swallowed them whole. The air below was warm, far too warm for stone. It carried a faint, metallic taste, like iron and ash. They found the lowest chamber intact. No tools, no relics, no bell. Only a figure seated against the far wall, half covered in dust and roots. The skeleton was perfectly preserved, hands folded neatly over the chest, and embedded in the ribcage, A small, blackened key fused into the bone. The leader of the team, a young man named Harper, reached out to touch it. The instant his fingers brushed the metal, the walls hummed. At first, it was subtle, the faint tremor of shifting air. Then, deeper, rolling through the floor like thunder held in breath. Harper froze. The others called his name, their voices echoing oddly, bending around a sound none of them made. A low note rose from the earth. Long, hollow, alive. One of the archaeologists gasped, then fell silent. Harper backed away, pale as wax. The sound continued, pulsing in slow rhythm. He looked down at the skeleton again. Its skull had tilted ever so slightly upward, and deep within the hollow ribs, something glowed faintly, gold at the edges, dark at the core. The team fled before sunset. Only Harper stayed behind, staring into the dark where the bell once slept. When they found him hours later, he was standing perfectly still, eyes open, chest unmoving. But if you listened closely, just close enough, you could hear the faintest sound escaping his throat. Dum, dum, dum. Before we end, listener, remember this. Not every silence is peace. Sometimes it's only the pause between tolls. Sleep well tonight, and if you wake to the sound of a bell, don't count the rings. Just breathe once, and pray you still can.